It began, as these things often do, with a ghost on the screen. A single, anomalous blip piercing the digital frontier of the Caucasus exclusion zone. At 4:13 Zulu, NORAD's deep range arrays painted a target that shouldn't exist. It was moving at just over 200 knots, hugging the jagged teeth of the mountains with impossible precision. A phantom gliding through the world's most volatile corridor of airspace. It wasn't squawking no transponder code, no friendly IFF handshake. It was a digital void, a question mark screaming across a monitor in a darkened room deep under Cheyenne Mountain. The initial assessment was a drone, a high-end UAV from the Russians or the Chinese, testing the perimeter. The flight path was too clean, too perfect for a human hand. It followed the nap of Earth, using the terrain to mask its signature with a terrifying, machine-like intelligence. For 47 minutes, the ghost flew its silent, perfect line. Multiple attempts to hail it on standard civilian and military frequencies were met with an unnerving, absolute silence. The silence of a machine. Or the silence of a pilot with no intention of talking. Tensions in the command hub ratcheted up with every sweep of the radar. The watch commander, a seasoned Air Force colonel named Rusk, chewed on an unlit cigar, his face a mask of controlled anxiety. This was more than a probe. The ghost's trajectory was a razor line aimed directly at a newly established NATO listening post, a black site installation so secret that its existence was officially denied even within the highest echelons of the Pentagon. This wasn't a test, it was a threat. The order was given to scramble a quick reaction alert flight. 2 F-22 Raptors from the 94th Fighter Squadron. Call signs Reaper 1 and Reaper 2 were vectored to intercept. They were the apex predators of the sky, the most advanced air superiority fighters ever built. This was swatting a fly with a sledgehammer, but in the Caucasus easy, you didn't take chances. The Raptors sliced through the stratosphere, their pilots calm, professional voices crackling over the encrypted network. They expected to find a drone, maybe something with a sleek, composite body and a worry propeller. They would identify, warn, and if necessary, vaporize it. Standard procedure. But as they descended through the cloud deck, guided by the AWACS controller's disembodied voice, they saw it, and it was impossible. It wasn't a drone, it wasn't a sleek, futuristic spy plane, it was an AH-64 Apache attack helicopter, an American one, or at least, it was painted to look like one, right down to the faded olive drab paint and the stenciled serial numbers on the tailboom, but it was flying like no Apache ever had. It moved with a fluid, predatory grace, its rotor blades carving the thin mountain air with an acoustic signature that was all wrong. It was too quiet, too smooth, and its flight path was a work of art, a ballet of topographical navigation that left the Raptor pilots, masters of their own domain, momentarily stunned. The lead Raptor pilot, Major Cade Vandal Turner, keyed his mic, his voice a mixture of disbelief and professional irritation. Griffin, this is Reaper 1. Visual on the bogey, be advised. It appears to be one of ours, an Army gunship, Apache model. No ordnance visible on pylons. I say again, it looks like a friendly. The response from the AWACS, call sign Griffin, was immediate, the controller's voice tight with confusion. Reaper 1, command confirms no friendly assets are scheduled in that sector. All Army birds are accounted for. You are to assume hostile intent, intercept and identify. Roger Griffin, Vandal replied, banking his Raptor to get a closer look. Bogey is not responding to hails, it's just flying, holding a steady course, 200 knots. This is weird, Griffin. Real weird. As they closed the distance, the absurdity of the situation deepened. The Apache was a ground attack machine, a beast designed to chew up tanks and infantry from low altitude. It had no business being this high, this fast, or this deep in contested airspace. It was like seeing a shark swimming on a highway. Vandals. Wingman, a younger, cockier pilot named Jester, chimed in. Maybe he's lost. Vandal took a wrong turn out of Fort Rucker. The joke fell flat. The precision of the Apache's flight path belied any notion of a lost pilot. This was deliberate. This was calculated. Vandal brought his F-2 to alongside the helicopter, close enough to see the pilot in the cockpit. The canopy was tinted, but he could make out a silhouette, a helmeted figure, motionless, looking straight ahead. Unidentified aircraft. Vandal broadcast on the International Guard frequency, his voice a hard, official monotone. You are in a restricted military operations area. You are ordered to alter your course immediately to 090 and follow me. Acknowledge. The Apache flew on, its rotor blades, a ghostly, silent disk, against the snow-dusted peaks. No acknowledgement, no deviation in its course. Just that serene, impossible flight. Colonel Rosk's voice cut through the command channel, overriding the AWACS controller. He had seen enough. Reaper 1, this is Overlord. That asset is a direct threat to national security. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Splash the target. Vandal's blood ran cold. Splash it. An American helicopter. Overlord. Reaper 1. Respectfully, sir. Are we sure about this? It could be a malfunction. A pilot in distress. Your orders are clear. Major Russ. Voice was granite. Take it down. Vandal hesitated for a fraction of a second. A lifetime in the air. His finger hovered over the master arm switch. He was a professional, trained to follow orders, but this felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally, wrong. Before he could act, something happened that would forever alter the course of aerial combat doctrine. The Apache's radio, silent for nearly an hour, crackled to life. It wasn't a voice that came through, not at first. It was a sound, a soft, melodic humming, a woman's voice, humming a lullaby. It was a simple, haunting tune, the kind a mother might sing to a child. It filled the encrypted network, a surreal and deeply unsettling counterpoint to the high-stakes tension. Just as confused voice broke the spell. What the hell is that? Then, the humming stopped. A new voice, calm and clear, spoke into the void. It was female, with a slight unplaceable accent that was both musical and precise. Reaper Flight, she said, her tone conversational, almost friendly. This is Valkyrie. I'd advise against that. Vandal was floored. Valkyrie, identify yourself. You are in violation of, I know where I am, Major, the voice interrupted, still maddeningly calm. And you're about to have a very bad day if you don't break off. I'm tracking for more bogeys, inbound, fast. Looks like a flight of Su-57s, your new Russian friends. They're not squawking either. On the AWACS screen, it happened just as she said it. 4 new blips appeared from the east, screaming towards them at supersonic speed. Russian 5th-generation fighters, the best they had. The Ghost had been bait. The whole thing was a trap. The Apache wasn't the target. The Raptors were. Vandal's training took over. He wrenched his F-22 into a hard defensive turn, his mind racing. Who was this woman? How did she know? Her sensors had picked up the threat before NORAD's multi-billion-dollar network. The Apache, the slow, lumbering gunship, suddenly banked hard, not away from the incoming threat, but towards it. It moved with an agility that defied physics, its nose dropping as it accelerated into the valley below, disappearing from radar once more. The woman's voice came over the radio one last time, but this time, it was different. The calm conversational tone was gone, replaced by something else. It was a sound that would be seared into the memory of every pilot and controller listening. It was the sound of quiet, knowing laughter. It was low and musical, yet it carried an edge of pure, unadulterated ice. It was the laughter of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen, and was relishing every single moment of it. The laughter of a predator who had just watched her prey walk willingly into her snare. In the command hub under Cheyenne Mountain, Colonel Rosk stared at the screen where the 2 friendly blue icons of the Raptors were now being converged upon by 4 hostile red triangles. The mysterious green icon of the Apache was gone, vanished into the clutter of the terrain, and echoing in his headset was that chilling, impossible sound. The laughter of the Valkyrie. The day had just begun, and already, all the rules of the sky had been broken. The mystery of the Ghost on the screen was just the first layer of an enigma that would pull them all into a conflict where the lines between friend and foe, hunter and hunted, were about to be violently redrawn by a lone woman in an obsolete helicopter, a pilot whose call sign was about to become a legend whispered in equal parts terror and awe. Her name was Anya Petrova, though no one on that channel knew it yet. They only knew her as Valkyrie, and they were about to learn why. The name was not a boast, it was a promise. She was the chooser of the slain. The 4 Sukhoi Su-57 felons were a symphony of menace. Their blended wing-body design and thrust vector nozzles gave them a cobra-like lethality, and they sliced through the air with an arrogance befitting Russia's premier stealth fighters. Leading the flight was Colonel Ivan Volkov, a veteran of the Syrian conflict and a pilot whose reputation was built on cold, calculated aggression. His call sign was Wolf. His mission was simple: eliminate the 2 American Raptors that had been lured into the trap and assert Russian dominance over the exclusion zone. The Apache was bait, a curiosity to be dealt with later. His primary Targets were the F-22s, the symbols of American air power. On his HUD, the two Raptor contacts were locked, their positions fed to him by his wingman's advanced sensor suites. He was the wolf, and the sheep had wandered into his valley. All wolf flight, he barked in Russian over his private channel, engage at will. Let's give these American cowboys a lesson. His pilots, all hand-picked for this operation, responded with crisp affirmations. They moved into a pin formation, a classic maneuver designed to box in and annihilate their targets. Inside the cockpit of Reaper 1, Vandal was fighting for his life. The world had compressed into a maelstrom of alarms, G-forces, and the urgent, clipped voice of the AWACS controller. Reaper 1, multiple bandits, bearing 085 for 20. Brake right, brake right. Vandal threw his stick to the right, the F-22 responding instantly, the G-suit squeezing his legs and torso to keep the blood in his head. Jester was right there with him, a loyal, if terrified, wingman. I'm defensive, Vandal, Jester yelled, his breathing ragged. Fox 2 from my 6. A missile launch warning shrieked in his ears. He popped flares, a shower of incandescent magnesium designed to fool the heat-seeking missile. He saw the smoke trail of the missile arc past his canopy, a deadly white snake missing its prey by inches. The Russian pilots were good, damn good. They were pressing their advantage, using their numbers to overwhelm the two technologically superior, but outnumbered, Raptors. Vandal and Jester were in a purely defensive fight, bleeding energy and altitude with every desperate maneuver. They were being herded, pushed further down into the canyons where the felon's superior maneuverability at lower speeds would be a distinct advantage. It was a textbook killbox. And then the lullaby started again, that same haunting melody humming softly over the chaos of the main channel. It was Valkyrie having fun up there. Boys, her voice cut through, laced with a calm amusement that was utterly incongruous with the life-or-death struggle unfolding above her. Vandal, gritting his teeth as he dodged another missile, didn't have time for games. Valkyrie, if you have any assets, we could use them right now. Assets? The humming stopped. Major, I am the asset. From the canyon floor, the Apache rose like a vengeful spirit. It didn't climb vertically like a normal helicopter. It seemed to launch itself upwards, its movements impossibly fast, impossibly agile. On Wolf's radar, the Apache's signature suddenly bloomed. But it wasn't a helicopter signature. It was a mess of conflicting signals, a storm of electronic noise. His systems couldn't get a clean lock. It was as if the Apache was wearing a cloak of ghosts. Wolf 2, what is your status on the helicopter? Wolf demanded. I can't lock it, Wolf leader, his wingman replied, his voice tight with frustration. It's jamming my systems. It's spoofing multiple targets. Valkyrie's Apache was a Frankenstein's monster of aviation technology. On the outside, it looked standard issue. On the inside, it was a blacksite project, a flying electronic warfare platform packed with systems that officially didn't exist. Its rotor blades were tipped with experimental materials that dampened its acoustic signature, and its fuselage was coated in a radar-absorbent paint that was still in development. The core of its lethality, however, was a next-generation jamming and spoofing suite known as Corin. It could project dozens of false radar images, mimic the signatures of other aircraft, and wage a silent, invisible war in the electromagnetic spectrum. And Anya Petrova Valkyrie was its virtuoso. She had been a prodigy in the Russian military's cyber warfare division before defecting to the West, bringing with her secrets that were worth more than a fleet of fighters. She wasn't just a pilot. She was a ghost in the machine, a hacker, who flew a helicopter. The Apache was her instrument, and the sky was her network. Reaper flight. Her voice was calm, instructional. Extend west, I'll draw their attention. Just try to keep up. Before Vandal could respond, the Apache did something that defied all logic. It flew directly at the four Su-57s. A helicopter, a machine with a top speed of a little over 200 knots, was charging head-on at four of the most advanced fighter jets on the planet. On the Russian channel, there was a moment of stunned silence, followed by derisive laughter. Is he insane? Wolf 3 chuckled. The little sparrow wants to fight the hawks. Wolf was more cautious. The jamming was too effective, too sophisticated. This was a trap. Ignore the helicopter, he ordered. Stay on the Raptors, but it was too late. Valkyrie wasn't trying to engage them with weapons. She was engaging them with information. Or rather, misinformation. As she flew towards them, the Karen system went into overdrive. On the Russian pilots' screens, the sky suddenly filled with phantoms. Dozens of friendly IFF signals blossomed around the Raptors, making it impossible to distinguish the real targets from the ghosts. Alarms screamed in their cockpits, warning of missile locks from aircraft that weren't there. "I've got 5, no, 10 boogies on me," Wolfer yelled, his voice cracking with panic as he instinctively broke formation to evade a non-existent threat. The disciplined Russian pincer attack dissolved into chaos. The pilots were reacting to shadows, their advanced fighters rendered useless by a flood of bad data. They were blind, deaf, and fighting ghosts. Valkyrie's voice came over the American channel, a cool counterpoint to the pandemonium she was creating. "Vandal, your 6 o'clock is clear. Jester, you have a felon trying to reacquire. Break left and dive. He can't follow you into that ravine." She was conducting the battle not as a pilot, but as a controller. Her situational awareness was total. She wasn't just seeing the battlefield in 3 dimensions, she was seeing it in 4, manipulating the invisible streams of data that connected every aircraft in the sky. Vandal and Jester, following her instructions without question, found themselves flying through impossible gaps in the Russian formation. They were no longer the hunted. They were being guided by an unseen hand, a guardian angel in a gunship. Colonel Volkov, Wolf, was furious. His elite squadron was being dismantled, not by superior firepower, but by trickery. He fought to regain control, trying to rally his pilots. "Or Wolf flight, ignore the ghosts. Form on me, focus on the lead Raptor." He isolated Vandal's F-22 on his screen, filtering out the noise through sheer force of will and experience. He had a clean shot. He squeezed the trigger. "Fox 3, he roared. An R-37M hypersonic missile, the deadliest in the Russian arsenal, leaped from its pylon, accelerating to Mach 6 in seconds. It was a guaranteed kill. There was no outrunning it, no outmaneuvering it. Vandal, missile, inbound, no escape vector. The AWACS controller screamed, his voice a death knell. Vandal's world slowed down. He saw the missile's smoke trail. This was it. He braced for impact. "Oh, I don't think so." Valkyrie's voice was a soft murmur in his ear. The Apache, which had been lurking below, suddenly surged upwards again, positioning itself directly between Vandal's Raptor and the incoming missile. It was a suicidal move. The missile's proximity fuse would detonate, shredding the helicopter and everything around it. But the Apache didn't fire flares. It didn't try to jam the missile's seeker head. Instead, a small pod on its stub wing glowed for a fraction of a second, emitting a focused, invisible beam of energy. The R-37M, one of the most sophisticated weapons on Earth, suddenly went stupid. Its guidance system fried. Its flight path became erratic. It tumbled end over end, sailing harmlessly past the F-22 and exploding against a distant mountainside. A directed energy weapon, a defensive system that wasn't supposed to exist for another decade. On the ground, Colonel Rosk watched the replay, his unlit cigar falling from his lips. In the cockpit of his Su-57, Colonel Volkov stared in utter disbelief. He had seen the impossible. A complete system kill on his best missile. The laughter returned to the American channel. It was louder this time, tinged not with ice, but with pure, unadulterated joy. It was the laughter of an artist who had just completed her masterpiece. "Checkmate," Valkyrie said. The remaining 3 felons, their confidence shattered, their systems still screaming about phantom threats, broke off the engagement. They turned and fled east, leaving their leader alone. Colonel Volkov Wolf was now isolated, facing 2 F-22s and a helicopter from hell. The hunter had become the hunted. The balance of power in the sky had not just shifted, it had been fundamentally broken by a woman whose primary weapon was not a missile, but a line of code. The mockery from the Russian pilots had turned to stunned silence. The confusion in the American command hub was turning to a terrifying, dawning realization. They were witnessing the birth of a new kind of warfare, and its herald was a lone pilot in a stolen Apache, a woman who hummed lullabies in the middle of a dogfight and laughed in the face of death. Her backstory, the reason for her existence in this place at this time, was a closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of people in the deepest shadows of intelligence. It was a story of betrayal, of loss, and of a promise made to a dying man. It was the story of why she flew not for a flag, but for a ghost. And it was the reason her call sign was not just a name, but a sacred vow. The sky, once a canvas of chaos, was now eerily quiet. The 3 fleeing Su-57s were little more than fading icons on the radar screen, their retreat a testament to the psychological devastation they had just endured. Alone, suspended in the vast, cold air between the peaks, was Colonel Ivan Volkov. His Su-57, the felon, felt less like a predator and more like a cage. He was a wolf, but he had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and utterly humiliated by a ghost in a helicopter. His training, his experience, his instincts, all of it, had been rendered obsolete. He was a master of a game whose rules had been rewritten mid-play without his knowledge. Vandal and Jester reformed their fighting wing, flanking the lone Russian fighter. The tactical advantage was now overwhelmingly in their favor. The AWACS controller, his voice now steady and confident, began to vector them for the kill. Reaper flight, you are cleared to engage. Target is isolated. Prosecute. But Vandal hesitated. He looked at the Su-57 not as a target, but as a fellow pilot. A warrior who had been defeated by something beyond his comprehension. There was no honor in this kill. Valkyrie, Vandal transmitted, his voice respectful, deferential. What are your intentions? The response was immediate and surprising. My intentions, Major, I'm a little busy right now. Your wingman has a hydraulic leak. Left engine, looks like he took some shrapnel when that missile went wide. Jester's voice, shaky and thin, confirmed it. She's right, Vandal. I've got a caution light. Pressure's dropping. Vandal's respect deepened into awe. Her situational awareness was supernatural. She wasn't just watching the enemy. She was watching them, monitoring their systems, anticipating their needs. She was their shepherd. Colonel Volkov. Valkyrie's voice switched to Russian, her accent flawless, her tone devoid of triumph. Your flight has abandoned you. You are out of options. Disarm your weapons and vector to the west. You will be escorted to a neutral airfield. On the Russian channel, there was only silence. For Volkov, this was the ultimate disgrace. To be captured was worse than death. He was a wolf. Wolves were never caged. I will not surrender to American dogs. He spat back, his voice thick with venom. Then you will die, Valkyrie replied, her voice losing its warmth, becoming as cold and hard as the mountain peaks around them. But your death will be meaningless. A footnote in a report no one will read. Your government will disavow you. Your family will be told you died in a training accident. Your sacrifice will be for nothing. Her words were not a threat, they were a statement of fact. She understood the cold calculus of the world they inhabited. She was speaking his language, the language of spies and soldiers, of plausible deniability and forgotten heroes. There is another way, she continued, her voice softening slightly. A way for you to go home, a way for this to end without any more blood. But it requires you to do one thing. It requires you to trust me. Trust her. The architect of his humiliation. The ghost who had dismantled his squadron. It was unthinkable. Volkov's hand tightened on his control stick. His pride screamed at him to fight, to go down in a blaze of glory, but her voice, calm and logical, had pierced his rage. She was right. His death here would be a waste. Valkyrie's backstory was a tapestry woven from the threads of this cold, brutal logic. She was born in the dying days of the Soviet Union, the daughter of a brilliant aerospace engineer who had designed the very systems she now subverted. Father had believed in the promise of a new, open Russia. He had collaborated with the West, sharing technology, believing it would lead to peace. Instead, he was branded a traitor by the new regime, his work stolen, his name erased. He was arrested, tortured, and died in a forgotten gulag. Anya, then a rising star in the military's cyber division, was forced to watch as the country she loved devoured her family. Her defection wasn't a choice, it was an escape. She carried with her not just secrets, but a burning, righteous fury. She wasn't fighting for America, she was fighting against the shadows that had consumed her father. Her war was personal. The call sign Valkyrie was his last gift to her. In Norse mythology, the Valkyries were the choosers of the slain, the divine figures who decided who lived and who died in battle. But her father had told her a different version of the myth. He said the Valkyries did not choose who died, but who was worthy of being saved. They were guardians, not reapers. Her mission was not to kill, but to prevent meaningless death, to honor the sacrifice of soldiers by ensuring it was not in vain. This was the vow she had made at his unmarked grave. This was the promise that fueled her. What do you want? Volkov finally asked, his voice a low growl of defeat. I want you to live, Colonel, Valkyrie said. Turn your aircraft around. Go home. Tell your commanders what happened here. Tell them there is a new player on the board. Tell them the ghosts of the past are watching. She was sending a message, using him as her messenger. This entire engagement, from the initial lure to this final, quiet standoff, had been a piece of theater, a demonstration of power designed not to start a war, but to prevent one. Vandal and Jester could only listen, mesmerized. This was beyond their understanding of warfare. This was geopolitics conducted at 30,000 feet. a chess match where they were merely pawns. And if I refuse, Volkov challenged. If you refuse. Valkyrie's voice was soft, almost a whisper. Then I will show you why they call me Valkyrie, and you will not see home again. The threat was unspoken, but absolute. It was not a threat of missiles or guns. It was the threat of the unknown, of the power she had demonstrated, a power that could pluck a missile from the sky and turn a squadron of elite fighters into a panicked mob. Volkov was a proud man, but he was not a fool. He had seen the impossible. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had laughed at him. Slowly, deliberately, he reached forward and saved his weapon systems. He banked his Su-57 to the east and engaged his afterburners, accelerating away from the battle, away from his defeat. He was alive, he was going home, but he was a changed man. He had met a Valkyrie, and she had deemed him worthy of being saved. As the Russian fighter disappeared, a profound silence once again descended upon the mountains. The battle was over. In the command center, there was no celebration. There was only a stunned, reverent quiet. They had witnessed a paradigm shift. Colonel Rusk picked up his cigar, not to light it, but to hold it, a talisman in a world that no longer made sense. Get me everything we have on a project called Valkyrie, he said to his aide, his voice a low, urgent whisper. I want to know who she is. I want to know what she is. Vandal escorted the limping jester towards the nearest friendly airbase. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. He had been a participant in a battle that would never be spoken of, a secret victory in a secret war. He owed his life, and the life of his wingman, to a woman in a helicopter he had been ordered to shoot down. Valkyrie, he said into the open channel. The response was a soft click of the mic, an acknowledgement without words. Then the humming returned, the gentle, haunting lullaby, a sound of peace after a storm. It was her signature, her sign-off. The Apache banked and descended back into the canyons, its impossible silhouette melting into the terrain, becoming a ghost once more. The icon on the radar screen vanished. She was gone, but her presence lingered. The memory of her voice, her laughter, her power, was burned into the minds of everyone who had heard it. The mockery that had initially greeted the sight of a lone helicopter was gone, replaced by a deep and abiding respect. The pilots, the controllers, the commanders, they had all underestimated her. They had seen an Apache and judged it by its frame. They had not seen the spirit within, the ghost in the machine, the woman who had turned the sky itself into her weapon. The legend of Valkyrie had begun. It was a legend born in secrecy, forged in a crucible of impossible odds, and sealed with an act of mercy. It was the story of a pilot who was more than a pilot, a weapon that was more than a weapon, and a battle that had changed the very nature of the fight. And as Vandal flew home, the lullaby echoed in his mind, a reminder that in the cold, brutal world of modern warfare, the most powerful force was not a missile or a stealth fighter, but the unbreakable will of a single, underestimated soul. The debriefing was a sterile, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. Vandal and Jester sat at a long table facing a panel of grim-faced officers. At the head of the table was Colonel Rusk, his eyes heavy with the weight of the secrets he was now forced to carry. Behind him, on a large screen, was a live video feed of a man whose face was intentionally kept in shadow, a four-star general from the Pentagon's Special Projects Division. For 3 hours, Vandal and Jester recounted every detail of the engagement. They spoke of the ghost on the radar, the impossible maneuvers of the Apache, the swarm of phantom signals, the missile that died in midair, and the calm commanding voice that had orchestrated their survival. They spoke of the laughter. When they were finished, a thick silence filled the room. The shadowed general was the first to speak, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Major Turner, he said, addressing Vandal, in your professional opinion, what was this asset? What was Valkyrie? Vandal took a deep breath. He had been asking himself the same question for hours. Sir, he began, choosing his words carefully. She wasn't just a pilot, she was a conductor, an artist. She wasn't flying a helicopter, she was playing an orchestra. The sky, the electromagnetic spectrum, our senses, their senses, it was all her instrument. We weren't just being supported, we were being controlled, guided. I've never seen anything like it. Jester, still pale from his near-death experience, nodded in agreement. It was like she was 10 seconds ahead of everyone. She knew what the Russians were going to do before they did. She knew my engine was failing before I did. It was predictive, almost psychic. Rusk leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the table and the helicopter itself. The performance profile you described is not possible for an AH-64. No, sir, it's not, Vandal confirmed. It moved like a fighter jet when it wanted to. The acceleration, the agility, it defied physics, and the stealth and EW capabilities were something out of science fiction. It made our raptors look like crop dusters. The shadowed general let the weight of their testimony settle in the room. The implications were staggering. A single asset, a single pilot, had demonstrated a capability so far beyond their current understanding that it bordered on the magical. It was a quantum leap in military technology, a genuine game-changer, and it was a complete mystery. Your report will be classified at the highest level, the general stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. You will not speak of this to anyone, not your wives, not your commanding officers, not your priests. The events of today did not happen. Valkyrie does not exist. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Vandal and Jester replied in unison. The official story would be that they had encountered a flight of unidentified drones and had driven them off. A minor, insignificant skirmish. The truth was too dangerous, too destabilizing. The truth was that they had a weapon that could make them invincible, and they had no idea who controlled it. The legend of Valkyrie was already spreading, not in official reports, but in the hushed, encrypted whispers between pilots and radar operators, a ghost story for the digital age. They called her the Angel of the Caucasus, the Witch of the Wasteland. Her call sign became a modern myth, a symbol of an unseen, all-powerful force in the sky. The mockery that had once been associated with the idea of an Apache challenging a fighter jet was gone, replaced by a fearful reverence. Every strange blip on a radar screen, every unexplained system glitch, was now attributed to her. She was the explanation for the unexplainable. Meanwhile, in a hidden hangar carved into the side of a mountain 1,000 miles away, Anya landed her Apache. The canopy hissed open, and she climbed out, her movements fluid and economical. She was smaller than one might expect, her frame slender, almost delicate, but her eyes, a piercing shade of ice blue, held a depth and intensity that spoke of old sorrows and an iron will. She was met on the tarmac by a single man, a grizzled, wearer-looking case officer who went by the name of Marcus. He was her handler, her only link to the shadowy organization that funded her one-woman war. He handed her a steaming mug of tea. You made some noise today, Anya, he said, his voice a mixture of admiration and concern. Anya took a sip of the tea, her gaze distant. They needed to be reminded, she said softly. They were getting arrogant, pushing the boundaries. Sometimes, you have to show the wolves that there's a dragon in the forest. A dragon in a helicopter. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You took an incredible risk, engaging for felons, neutralizing a hypersonic missile. If any one of those systems had failed, they didn't, Anya interrupted, her voice firm. I trust my father's work, and I trust my instincts. She walked past him, towards a small Spartan living quarter at the back of the hangar. On a workbench lay a collection of old, faded photographs. One was of her as a child, sitting on the shoulders of a smiling, proud-looking man with kind eyes. Her father, beside the photo, was a small, hand-carved wooden bird, a Valkyrie. It was the last thing he had given her before they took him away. Her insignia, painted discreetly below the cockpit of her Apache, was not the standard military roundel. It was a stylized silhouette of that wooden bird, its wings spread wide. It was a symbol of her promise, her legacy. This was the emotional center of her world. Not a flag, not a country, but the memory of a man who had believed in a better world. A man who had been betrayed by the very people he had tried to save. Her fight was not for territory or for politics. It was for his memory. It was to ensure that no other soldier, on any side, would be sacrificed for the lies of powerful men. This was the truth of Valkyrie. She was not a weapon of war, but an instrument of peace. A peace she enforced with a terrifying, undeniable power. Marcus followed her, his expression somber. The Russians are screaming. They're demanding answers. The Pentagon is in chaos. They don't know if you're a friend or a foe. I am neither, Anya said, picking up the wooden bird, her fingers tracing its familiar lines. I am a consequence. The legacy of that day was not measured in the wreckage of downed aircraft, for there was none. It was measured in the silence that followed. The Russian incursions stopped. The aggressive posturing ceased. An uneasy, unspoken truce settled over the Caucasus exclusion zone. A message had been sent and received. Wolf, Colonel Volkov, was debriefed in Moscow. He told his superiors the truth, describing the ghost that had dismantled his flight. He was met with disbelief, then suspicion. He was grounded, accused of cowardice, of fabricating a story to cover his own failure. But the black box data from his aircraft, and from the other 3 pilots, confirmed his story. The phantom signals, The system failures, the impossible energy spike that had killed his missile, it was all there. The Russian High Command was terrified. They had encountered a force they could not understand, a technological gap they could not bridge. They pulled back, their plans for regional dominance shattered. Vandal and Jester returned to their squadron, carrying a secret that set them apart from their peers. They were quieter, more thoughtful. They had looked into the future of aerial combat, and it had humbled them. Vandal, once the epitome of the cocky fighter jock, now carried a quiet respect for the unseen forces that governed his world. He had learned that the most dangerous threat is the one you underestimate. The story of the Apache that went up against 6 fighter jets became a cautionary tale, a legend whispered in flight simulators and briefing rooms. The details were blurred, the facts distorted, but the core of the story remained. A lone, underestimated pilot had achieved the impossible, and her laughter, the sound that had split the skies, became a symbol. It was the symbol of a new kind of power, a power that was not measured in firepower, but in intelligence, in foresight, in the courage to defy expectations. It was the legacy of Valkyrie, the woman who had inherited her father's genius and turned it into a shield. The ghost who haunted the world's most dangerous skies, forever changing the way nations prepared for war. Her laughter was not one of mockery, but of liberation. It was the sound of a single soul, unbound by rules and conventions, soaring free in a world that sought to cage her. The silence in the Caucasus did not last. A new kind of storm was brewing, one born not of military ambition, but of corporate greed. A private military contractor, Argus, had been granted clandestine permission by a rogue faction within the Russian government to begin illegal resource extraction in the neutral zone. They were a ruthless, well-equipped force, operating outside the laws of war, and their presence threatened to destabilize the entire region, potentially dragging NATO and Russia into a direct conflict. Their air cover was a squadron of 6 heavily modified Su-25 Frogfoot attack jets, piloted by mercenary soldiers of fortune with no allegiance to any flag, only to their paycheck. They were led by a notorious South African pilot named Kalen Hyena Vos, a man known for his brutality and his contempt for the rules of engagement. Argus knew about the legend of Valkyrie. They dismissed it as propaganda, a ghost story created to explain away a Russian failure. Hyena and his pilots, brash and overconfident in their upgraded jets, openly mocked the tale. They painted laughing skulls on the noses of their aircraft, a direct challenge to the unseen guardian of the mountains. They began their operations with aggressive, provocative flights, daring the ghost to show herself. In her mountain hangar, Anya watched them. Her network of passive sensors, scattered throughout the range, gave her a complete picture of their movements. She saw their arrogance, their disregard for the fragile peace she had brokered. Marcus urged caution. "This is different, Anya. These aren't soldiers, they're pirates. They don't follow any rules. The Pentagon won't authorize an engagement. It's too risky politically. They are threatening to ignite a war," Anya countered, her voice cold. "Their greed will cost thousands of lives. My father believed that technology should be a shield to protect the innocent, not a sword for corporate raiders. I will not let them dishonor his legacy." "And how will you stop them?" Marcus asked. "You can't just shoot them down. The fallout would be catastrophic." Anya looked at the schematics of her Apache, the Valkyrie projected on a holographic display. Its official designation was the AH-64X. The X stood for experimental, but to her it stood for something more. It was the unknown variable, the factor that no one could account for. "I won't have to shoot them down," she said, a faint, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "I'm going to disarm them. I'm going to take away their toys." The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. She would not engage the 6 Su-25s in a traditional dogfight. She would use the Valkyrie's unique capabilities to sit and non-lethally neutralize each aircraft, turning their own technology against them. It was a surgical strike, a digital decapitation. She took off at dusk, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of blood orange and bruised purple. The Valkyrie slipped into the mountains, a silent, predatory shadow. Hyena and his flight were on patrol, flying in a loose, arrogant formation. Their radios were filled with crude jokes and laughter. They were bored, spoiling for a fight. "Anything on the scope, Razor?" Hyena asked his wingman. "Just the rocks and the sheep, boss," came the reply. "This ghost is a nosher. Guess she's scared of a real fight." Suddenly, Razor's cockpit filled with a blinding white light. Every screen, every display went dead. His controls went limp. His engine sputtered and died. He was flying a glider, a 17-ton piece of dead metal. "Mayday, mayday, I've lost all power," he screamed, his voice a high-pitched squeal of panic. Valkyrie had targeted his jet with an Arab high-intensity electromagnetic pulsar (EMP) weapon precise enough to fry the electronics of a single aircraft without affecting the others. It was a weapon that wasn't supposed to be small enough to mount on a helicopter. Razor ejected his parachute, a tiny white flower against the darkening mountains. One down. Hyena's laughter stopped. What was that? Did he get hit by lightning? Before anyone could answer, the second mercenary pilot, call sign Scab, began screaming. His flight controls were going haywire. His jet was pitching and rolling violently, completely unresponsive to his inputs. "I've lost control. Something's flying my plane." Valkyrie had hacked his fly-by-wire system. Using a sophisticated cyber warfare package, she had seized control of his aircraft's control surfaces. She was flying his jet remotely, like a drone. She forced the Su-25 into a graceful, looping arc, sending it away from the combat zone and towards a deserted salt flat, where she initiated the ejection sequence for the pilot and brought the plane down for a relatively soft crash landing. 2 down. The remaining 4 pilots were in a panic. They were being hunted by an invisible enemy, picked off one by one with a terrifying surgical precision. Their mockery had turned to fear. "Where is it?" Hyena roared into his radio. "Somebody get a visual." The third pilot, Grave, saw a flicker of movement in a canyon below. He rolled his jet, diving to attack. "I've got a visual. A helicopter. Engaging." He fired a volley of cannon rounds, the shells stitching a line across the rocks. But the Apache was gone. It had been a ghost. A holographic projection generated by the Valkyrie's current system. As Grave focused on the hologram, the real Valkyrie rose up behind him. She didn't fire a missile. She launched a small drone that attached itself to the Su-25's fuselage. The drone deployed a cloud of carbon fiber filaments, microscopic threads that were instantly sucked into the jet's engine intakes. The engines choked, starved of air, and flamed out. 3 down. Hyena was now terrified and enraged. His squadron was being dismantled without a single shot fired in return. This was not a fight, it was an execution. "All remaining aircraft, scatter, return to base," he ordered. But it was too late. Valkyrie was already moving on the 4th and 5th jets. She used a high-powered microwave beam to boil the hydraulic fluid in their control lines, causing them to seize up. The pilots were forced to eject as their planes became uncontrollable. 4 and 5 down. Now, only Hyena was left. He was alone, flying through the mountains where his squadron had just been systematically, effortlessly erased. The sky was silent, except for the sound of his own ragged breathing. And then, he heard it, the lullaby, the soft, melodic humming over his radio. It was the ghost. It was the Valkyrie. She was toying with him. "You," he screamed into the void. "Show yourself. Fight me like a man." The humming stopped. Her voice calm and clear filled his cockpit. "You wanted a real fight, Hyena. You're just not equipped for it." Her Apache materialized in front of him, rising from a ravine like a phantom. It just hovered there, its targeting pod glowing like a single, malevolent red eye. It made no move to attack. It was simply watching him. Hyena's bravado broke. The man who had built a reputation on brutality and fear was now consumed by it. He was outmatched, outclassed, and completely at the mercy of the pilot he had mocked. He yanked his control stick, turning his jet to flee. He didn't care about the mission or the money anymore. He just wanted to escape the ghost in the helicopter. As he fled, Valkyrie's voice came over the radio one last time. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a sound that sealed her legend. It was her laughter. It was not the cold, icy laugh the Raptor pilots had heard. It was not the joyful laugh of her victory over the felons. This was different. It was a laugh of pity. A laugh that conveyed not malice, but a profound disappointment in his cowardice, his greed, his lack of honor. It was a sound that stripped him of his pride, his reputation, his very identity as a warrior. That laughter would haunt Kalen Voss for the rest of his days. It was the sound of his utter and complete defeat. Anya watched him go, then turned the Valkyrie back towards her hidden base. Her mission was complete. She had neutralized the threat, prevented a war, and protected the innocent, all without taking a single life. She had honored her father's legacy. She had upheld her vow. The story of the Argus squadron's defeat spread like wildfire through the intelligence community. The details were impossible, unbelievable. A squadron of 6 attack jets, disabled and dismantled without a single casualty. It was a feat of arms that had no precedent. The name Valkyrie was no longer just a legend, it was a fact. A terrifying, paradigm-shifting fact. She was a new kind of soldier, a new kind of power. She was a ghost, a guardian, a consequence, and, in the quiet solitude of her cockpit, as she hummed her father's lullaby, Anya Petrova knew that her war was far from over. The world was full of wolves and hyenas, and the dragon in the forest was always watching.